It was the summer of 1950. I had finished the 8th grade. It was expected that I would go to Pisgah, as my brother and my sister had. And so after finishing the 8th grade, I headed off to Pisgah Industrial Institute. That was the name in 1950, operated by the Wallers. I ended up there, worked for the summer. Then the school in Greenville, where I had just graduated from, decided they would have the 9th and 10th grade. So I went back to Greenville. So happened that a fellow by the name of Jerry Barker was the lab technician at the hospital, and he asked the hospital administration if they would let me come to the lab and wash glassware and be his assistant. They said sure. So I went to work in the lab at the hospital for Jerry. Jerry says, I only have 2 years, but in those 2 years, I'm going to try to teach you everything that I can as far as lab is concerned. And in the 2 years, I was able to sometime even relieve him and this, that, and other. And so when the 10th grade, I went back to Pisgah. At this time, it was the Mount Pisgah Academy. It had transferred from the individuals who had started the school to the conference, and it was named Mount Pisgah Academy. There I found a couple by the name of Earl and Marty Spaulding. Earl was the hospital administrator. He was the treasurer of the school. Marty was a nurse, and she was one of the nurses in the hospital. They asked me to be the lab technician for the hospital, 16 years old. I can tell you right now that the Lord was with me a lot and with the hospital. But we never had an incident of which there was any problems at all with me being the lab technician. Earl became the mentor of my life. Not only was he the mentor to show me everything, and he was one of those who was a jack of all trades. He could do most anything. And any time that I was not in class or at work, he had me beside him showing me exactly what and how you do everything that he had to do. So for 2 years, he was the mentor not only in that aspect, but he was the mentor in the spiritual part of my life. The hospital had a dark room, and Earl was a love of photography. That's probably the reason I have the same love for that. And we would go to the dark room to process the film that he had made and process and make the pictures. And in that dark room where the little red light that, didn't affect the film, but you really could not see one another. And so many times in the conversations that we had there was what helped to develop my life. After graduation, he and Marty invited me to Boulder, Colorado to build a house with them. So Earl and Marty pretty much accepted me as a really overgrown child since they were only 8 years older than me. But the relationship of which we developed has lasted for a lifetime. Charlotte and I, Marty didn't like the girl I was dating, and she was the one who kind of maneuvered everything to make sure that Charlotte and I was together leaving campus one day, and that kind of changed the whole situation, and so we give her the credit for that too. The rest of his life, I refer to him as Dad. Marty is my mom. We traveled across country many times to visit with them and this, that, and other. In fact, on our 50th wedding anniversary, we were with Marty and the family in Yosemite National Park on the very day of our anniversary. Leads me up to our story for the day. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, please come and be in our midst. Speak through me, that we may understand your wonderful truth. Thank you in advance. Amen. The story today is the book of Ruth. And some people think it is mistitled, that it should be the book of Naomi. Ruth is part of the player in this, but Naomi is the player from the very beginning to the very end. Who wrote the book of Ruth? According to the Talmud, which is the Jewish traditions, Samuel wrote the book of Ruth. In the literary world, the book of Ruth is considered to be the most beautiful short story ever written. Samuel wrote the book of Ruth because there was great apostasy in the land of Israel as the judges were ruling the land. And as a result of that, there was a famine in the land. So Elimelech, his wife Naomi, 2 sons, decided that they would go across to Moab, where there was plenty of food there. And it said they went to the land of Lot. Back in Genesis 13, so Abram said to Lot, "Please let there be no strife between me and you, between my herdsmen, your herdsmen. We're brothers. Don't let there be strife among us." This is a bad example to the people. We're supposed to be the Christians. We're supposed to be the ones. Is this not the whole land before you? If you take the left, I take the right. If you take the right, I take the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the plains of Jordan that was well watered and very beautiful, like the garden of the Lord. And he says, I'll take that part. That was the land of Moab. So Elimelech and his wife and 2 sons started their journey to the land of Moab. If you want to put that in perspective, it was about 20 miles from Bethlehem to Jericho, and it was about 30 miles from Jericho to the land of Lot. So they traveled with the family about as far from here to Hickory. And there they set up their home. You see, Elimelech and Naomi were one of the more important people in Bethlehem. All of them was well known, and the Lord had blessed them so greatly with 2 sons, of which would inherit everything and move on, as we see in our own lifetime, of carry on the family name. So they moved there, and it wasn't long before Elimelech had passed away. The 2 sons married Orpah and Ruth. And it said they lived there about 10 years after they were married. And then the 2 sons passed away, which left Naomi in a 10-year period of time of losing a husband and 2 sons and being left with 2 daughter-in-laws who were from the land of Moab. After their death, she had heard previous to this that the Lord had blessed Israel and that there was plenty of food there. So she decided that she would return to Bethlehem. So they packed up everything, and Ruth and Orpah and Naomi headed off down the road toward Bethlehem. In Naomi's mind, she could only think when she got back to Bethlehem, she would now be the lowest of the class in the land of Israel. She would be a widow. No longer was she entitled to the property. No longer could she, she had lost all of the support for the family. And so she said to the 2 girls, I want you to turn around and I want you to go. Go back to your home. Go back to your mother's home. And hopefully you will marry and you can have a family and you can be as faithful to them as you were to my 2 sons. And they said, no. We want to go with you. So they traveled a little while longer, and she just knew it's going to be so difficult for me. And can you imagine the impossibility of 2 widows who were not even of the land of Israel? What kind of life would they live? In the clear word by John, it said that Naomi had a prayer with them, and then she offered to them a blessing. And then she spelled out all of the reasons. I'm too old. I can have no more children. You're not going to wait that long Please go back. Orpah thought about this, and it says that she kissed her mother-in-law and she left. Now Naomi turns to Ruth, and she tells her 3 things of which she needs to consider. Number 1, go back. Your sister-in-law's already gone. Go with her. Go back to your people. And go back to the gods of which you know. For a moment, just think with me that here stands Naomi and here stands Ruth, arms around one another, tears flowing down their cheeks. And then Ruth says to Naomi, don't ask me to go. Where you go, I want to go. Okay? Took care of number 1 of Naomi's excuse. Your people shall be my people. Took care of number 2. And your God shall be my God. Number 3. And then she added the clincher. The Lord punished me severely if I ever leave you, and only death do us part. Death do us part. Death had parted Elimelech from Naomi. Death had parted both of these girls' husbands from them. Death had parted the two sons from Naomi. Punish me severely if done death do us part. Each one of us here have had that experience of death do us part. My dad, Earl, died on January 6, 2006. Death do us part. He's buried in a beautiful little cemetery at Holbrook. He was the principal there, and he's buried there on the hill. I've had the privilege of standing there beside the grave. Naomi knew at this point there was no need of any more excuses, and so she and Ruth headed to Bethlehem. And here's one of the sad parts that takes place in this story. She gets to Bethlehem, and she, of course, when she left, was one of the well-known people. And all the ladies come running out, and they said, "Oh, is this Naomi?" And she said, "The Lord has dealt so with me since I've been gone. He has turned his hand against me, and he has taken my husband, and he has taken my two sons, and all I have left. Just don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. Naomi means blessed, and call me Mara. That means bitter." Without realizing, never once did she ever offer to say, "But he gave me Ruth." Never mentioned it. Well, they lived in Bethlehem. One day Ruth said to her mother-in-law, "Why don't I go out and glean behind the harvesters?" Because they arrived back in Bethlehem at the harvest time of the barley harvest. Naomi said, "That's a good idea because our food is almost gone." See, there was no one to provide food now. And so Ruth was willing to go and walk with the maidens, with the servants of the fellow who owned the field. So she went, found a field, started gleaning, started, getting everything. And Boaz showed up. Boaz was a relative of Elimelech. He was one who he was a very wealthy man, and he had all this property. He said, "Who's the foreign girl out there?" Remember, Ruth had told him, "You're a foreigner. You don't want to go over to where you don't even know the country, you don't even know the God. You're a foreigner." He said, "Who's the foreign girl?" The fellow in charge said, that's the young lady who came back with Naomi. She'd been here all day. She has worked hard all day long. She has gleaned. She stopped once and went over under the shade and was been working everything." And so he said, "All right." So he went to say, and he said, Boaz said to Ruth, Let me give you a little bit of advice. You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field where they reap, and go after them, and don't let yourself get caught off in a corner by yourself. Next thing. And I have commanded young men not to touch you. That gives you a little bit of a gleam of what Naomi knew back there when she was asking them, please go home. You're a foreigner. Don't let yourself get caught off in the corner of a field, and I have told my people to not touch you. So she fell on her face. She thanked him for the kindness that he had shown to her. And why do you show me such kindness? And he says, oh, I have already heard how kind and how wonderful you have been to Naomi. You know, she's I'm a kin of her husband. Whenever you're thirsty, go over there and get you some water from where the men have gathered the water. Get you some. And so it was time for them to have something to eat, and he told, come over here and sit. So she sat with the servant girls. And then he gave her some parched grain. We have no idea what it was. And she ate, and she had plenty, and she took some home to Naomi. When she got through with the day, she thrashed out all of the what she had gleaned, and this, that, and other. And it said she took home 25 pounds of grain. And Naomi says, whoo, where did you glean today? She said, well, there was this big field, and the nicest person. Here, let me give you some. And she gave to Naomi some of the parched grain. And that was some signal to Naomi who was the person. And she said, well, they said his name was Boaz. Oh, she says, Boaz is a relative of my husband. So Ruth continued every day to go and get the grain. And there's one verse of which I think kind of sums up the situation. And it said, when the harvest was over, Ruth was still with Naomi. When the harvest was over, the food supply had ended. Now Naomi and Ruth probably were at the mercy of how the Jewish people dealt with widows and the poor. Naomi says, I think I ought to find you a husband. Tell you what you do. Again, Naomi. They'll be thrashing and this, that, and the other, and Boaz will be there, and, pretty yourself up, put on your perfume, and go over there and watch and see where Boaz lays down for the night. And when you see where he goes, take and lay at his feet, and he will find you there. So Ruth went off, she found, and they were having, they were thrashing. They were through with the year's harvest. So they were doing all their thrashing, and so they ate supper, and it said they were all joyful. She saw where Boaz went to lay down, and so she went after he was asleep, and she did exactly as Naomi said. She lifted the sheet, she laid down at his feet. Sometime during the night, he turned over, and can you all imagine the surprise whenever you turn over and all of a sudden there's somebody laying at your feet? You weren't there when you went to sleep. He said, "Who is it? Who is it?" She says, "I do not know your customs, but Naomi told me this was the way to see if you would take care of the family." If that be the case, and if you're willing to do that, then cover me with half of your shawl. And he did. He said, here's your blanket. Lay down. Spend the rest of the night. Just kind of like for it not to be seen that there was a woman at the thrashing floor. That was fine with her. So early in the morning, before it was daylight to where anybody could recognize anybody, she got up to leave and go back home. Fellows, I don't know about you, but he told her, "Here, hold out your shawl that you brought." And he filled it with grain, and he tied it up, and he put it on her back to take home. It was only 50 pounds. I've picked up a bag of cement, and I don't know that I want to carry it home. But the harvest was over. He was taking care of her and Naomi for a period of time. And he said, "Look, yes, I'm akin to Elimelech, but I am not the closest one. And I will go and find him, and I will ask him if he would like to buy the land that Naomi has for sale." So the very next morning, whenever Ruth got home, of course, Naomi says, "How'd it go? How'd it go?" And she told him everything. Oh, she says, "He'll take care of it today. I know he will not waste any time." And so he did. He went over to where the gate was. People came through, and this, that, and other. And he sat down waiting on the relative. He said, "Hey, come here a minute. Talk to me." Naomi's got the property up for sale, and you're the closest kin, and you're the one who has the right to the property. And if you want to buy it, you have that right. If you don't want to buy it, I will take it. No, he said, "I'll take it." He said, "Okay, there's only one stipulation in this, and that is that you must take Ruth also with the property and marry her." No, he said, no. If I should take the property, and if I should marry Ruth, and the first male child that she has, the property goes to him, then I've spent all this time on that property and it's not even mine. You can have it. Boaz says, "Fine." They swapped sandals. I wouldn't research that a little bit because I didn't know if they went separate ways with one sandal that they brought and one sandal that they got in the deal. But it does say that when the deal is all over with, they give their sandals back. But that was just simply a contract as we would see it today in this. Asked the people, the 10 people, to witness it, and they all witnessed it. And Boaz took Ruth as his wife. The first son that was born, everybody was so excited that here Ruth and Boaz had a little baby boy. And when he was born, they handed the baby boy to Naomi. And it said she laid the baby on her breast. No longer was she Mara. No longer was she bitter. She was Naomi, meaning pleasant. The lady says, let's see. What shall we name him? Oh, let's see. Let's name him Obed. And then so Ruth became David's great-grandmother. And it was through the line of David that 1,000 and some years later, Jesus was born. Is there a possibility that God, in his loving mercy of what took place, that they decided Jesus would also be born in the same place? In closing, I would like to give you one final statement. It says that Samuel wrote this because there was such apostasy, and he was wanting to show the children of Israel that what obedience to God does and brings about. Obedience in everyday life pleases God. When we reflect his character through our interactions with others, we bring glory to him.